Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Talking to Children About Race, a panel discussion. My name is Katie, and I'm a librarian with Anne Arundel County Public Library. We have lots of wonderful upcoming programs, which you can find on our website and in our Happenings newsletter. Don't forget to come back for our follow-up program with Kindness Grows Here, a celebration of differences. It's this Thursday at 1 p.m. You can find more information on our website and on Facebook. Without further ado, we welcome Kindness Grows Here and our Anne Arundel County parents. Thank you.
Good evening. It is an honor to be here tonight. My name is Kristen Caminetti, and I am the founder of Kindness Grows Here, a local nonprofit dedicated to fostering kindness in children. I am also the mom of 4 children, ages 10, 7, 5, and 2. I was thrilled when Anne Arundel County Public Library reached out after our first panel on talking with children about race, and they asked us to do a second one. I was even more thrilled when Dr. Maisha Gillens of Anne Arundel County Public Schools agreed to partner for part 2. I have worked with Dr. Gillens on numerous events and discussions focused on race and diversity. Her honesty and expertise make her an immense asset to our community and our school system. It is our hope that many of you joining us tonight were able to view part 1 of this series. If you didn't, this discussion will still be enriching and meaningful, but we strongly encourage you to go back afterwards at some point and watch part 1. As I mentioned, the mission of Kindness Grows Here is to foster kindness in children. I want to be clear that when we talk about kindness, a major aspect of that is actively speaking out against injustice. It involves educating our children about our nation's long history of racism. It involves empowering our children to make a difference. Dr. Andrea Kane, the superintendent of Queen Anne's County Public Schools, recently said, "Social justice and anti-racism education are a human issue, not a political issue. And the only way conditions in our world are going to improve is through communication and education." I'm grateful to each and every one of you for joining us for this human conversation with the goal of improving conditions in our world for all people, but especially for Black, Indigenous, and people of color whose lives depend on these changes. Dr. Gillens?
Thank you. Good evening. It is my pleasure to be here for part 2 of Talking to Children About Race. I am Dr. Maisha Gillens, the Executive Director of Equity and Accelerated Student Achievement for Anne Arundel County Public Schools, and the mother of 2 girls. My youngest daughter is 7 years old, and my oldest daughter will be celebrating her 12th birthday on Wednesday. This evening, I am honored to share this space with my co-facilitator, Kristen Caminetti, and our featured panelists. Kristen and I have worked together, as she spoke about before, on several events, such as how to talk to your kids about differences and what does social justice look like for elementary age children. It has truly been a pleasure working with someone who is passionate about social justice for historically marginalized people. And she doesn't just talk the talk, but she walks the walk, working towards creating anti-racist and just environments within our communities. I'm excited to welcome our panelists. Panelists, please give us your name, age of your children, and why you chose to be a part of this discussion this evening.
I'll start off. Good evening. My name is Issa Van Zen. I am the proud father of 3 boys, ages 3, 6, and 12. My 6-year-old goes to school here in Crofton. And I chose to be a part of this discussion again because this issue is timely and it is worth engaging. I think that this is a particular issue that you have to walk to get through it. I don't believe in taking a passive approach when it comes to dispelling the myths and the misinformation that people have endured bore the brunt of due to the fact that they are of a particular race. So I guess it's my pleasure to engage and do my part to do what I can to make the world a better place for everyone in this regard. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Heidi Oliver Ogilvie. I am the mother of two beautiful humans. My daughter is 20 years old and a rising junior at a university in Virginia, and my son is 13 and a rising 8th grader. This work is important because it's human work, it's life's work, and I feel like it's part of my calling as a human, trying to make the world better for other people and for people who have been traditionally marginalized and impacted by racism, race relations, and systemic oppression over the years and decades, I should say, centuries. So I'm delighted to be here and honored to be a part of the conversation that we'll have tonight.
Good evening. My name is Brian Whitley, and I was a secondary social studies teacher and avid teacher for 22 years, 18 of those in Anne Arundel County. I have two sons, Nolan, a rising 5th grader, and Bryce, who's 4.5. And I'm here today to continue the work. This has been a summer like too many others in the United States history as we watch civil unrest grow across the country. But I've seen a groundswell of people wanting to make a difference. Sadly, I've also seen some of that enthusiasm and momentum fade. And just because we aren't seeing the hashtags and social media posts as frequently doesn't mean that it's over. I'm hoping that parents tonight, and specifically white parents, understand why these conversations with their children are so important and leave tonight motivated to raise empathetic, caring children who are driven towards action as they change and change as they grow up.
Thank you so much, Isa, Heidi, and Brian. Now we'd like to review a few expectations we have for the dialogue tonight. We want this to be a safe space for our panelists so they can share honestly and openly. As you're sitting at home tonight, or if you're ever having conversations like this in your personal life, we ask that you lean into the conversation. If something upsets you or challenges you, engage more. Don't check out. As you're listening, if you have questions, ask. Please try to be fully present. If you hear something that you don't understand, listen intently and try to grasp the full meaning of what the person is saying, not just what you think they might be saying. If you have a question, please ask it in a way that enriches the conversation and encourages people to further engage, not in a way that causes them to check out from the discussion. As we mentioned, we did part 1 of this panel, which you can find on YouTube by searching AACPS, Talking to Children About Race. For those that missed it, I will very quickly review what was discussed. We started by sharing a few tips for having difficult conversations with kids. We explained that you do not need to be an expert on race or diversity to have these conversations. You simply need to be an expert on your own child. We encourage parents to use age-appropriate terminology and explain the importance of letting your child ask questions and being certain to answer the questions they ask while not overwhelming them with too much information. If they need or want to know more, they will ask follow-up questions. We reviewed a series of definitions, including race, racism, anti-racist, and Black Lives Matter. And please note that on the Kindness Grows Here website, we have a video that we created to explain what the Black Lives Matter movement is to children, as well as a companion guide for parents. Please check it out. Our first session focused primarily on a series of questions which our panelists answered. This was such a rich and powerful discussion. We encourage you to watch it if you haven't already. We also shared resources as well as our thoughts on what you would want other parents to know. Just as we began the first session with a review of some of the definitions to get us all on the same page, we'd like to do the same with this session. We wanted to include the definition again of race again in this session. This is a definition that you could use with a child. Race is putting people in categories based on what they look like. Some races you may have heard of are Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, and Indigenous people. Race doesn't tell us anything about a person, except a few details of what they might look like. Race doesn't tell us who a person is or what they can do. Race mostly seeks to describe people based on the color of their skin. This is a more detailed explanation for adults, which explains that race is a social construct. There are no significant biological differences between races. 99.9% of the genes in all human beings are the same. And yet, because race was this invented concept so many centuries ago, it has real impacts on people. Racial identity is a real thing, and it is not something to be ignored. One of the things that comes up often in any sensitive conversation is the idea of intent versus impact. Little kids have a really hard time with this. For example, when my son accidentally hurts one of his siblings and I encourage him to say, "I'm sorry," he often says, "But I didn't mean to. I don't have to say I'm sorry." This is a lack of understanding of intent versus impact. He didn't intend to hurt his sister, so he thinks he doesn't have to say I'm sorry, even though the impact is that she is hurt and crying. I love this quote you see here. Understanding the difference between intent and impact can be the difference between suffering and love. What does that really mean? It means that if we say or do something and we are told, "That was really upsetting to me," and we respond by saying, "You're just being sensitive, that's not what I meant at all." And by ignoring their feelings, by not caring about our impact, we are causing suffering. It's saying, "You don't matter. I don't care about you." But if instead we say, "Oh, wow, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. Please explain to me what was so hurtful," then we are saying, "I see you. I care about you. I know that no matter what I intended, that your feelings matter." And that is sending a message of love. Aisha?
Colorblindness. Now, this is definitely a term that I know that I've used before, especially my early years in teaching. And, a lot of times discussions we have in my office is when you know better, you do better. So I would like to take this opportunity to really unpack, what does colorblindness mean? So the idea that the best way to end discrimination is by treating individuals as equally as possible with regard to race, culture, or ethnicity. So let's explore this. This creates a society that denies the negative racial experiences, rejects the cultural heritage, and invalidates the unique perspectives of people of color. Being colorblind suggests that we don't see you and implies there is something shameful about the way I was born and the culture I was born into, and that we shouldn't talk about that. Colorblindness has helped make race into a taboo topic that polite people cannot openly discuss. If you can't talk about it, you can't understand it, much less fix the racial problems that plague our society. The next term is racial oppression. So oppression, it's the systemic and systematic suppression of a group or groups by a group in power. Racial oppression is to deny full access and potential in a given space or society based on race as a result of positional power. So here are some logistics as to how we're going to proceed for the remaining time we're together. So the panelists will discuss a set of prepared topics. Additionally, you can post your questions on Facebook, in the Facebook comments or the Zoom chat box. Our moderators from the library will ask questions at the very end. Due to time, we may not be able to ask or to answer all your questions, or for the library to ask all of your questions. So forgive us, but we are being mindful of our time this evening. We will provide resources at the end of the panel discussion. So what we've done this evening, we have taken, based on our first time together talking about race with children, part one, we did notice there were some comments that were posted on Facebook. Many of you are saying to yourselves, you never read the comments on Facebook. That is a no-no. Well, sometimes there is some value in reading those comments. And so the comments are the basis for our discussion this evening. So here are some things to consider as we discuss the comments that we did pull directly from Facebook. Consider, what was the intent, right? What was the intent of the person who wrote the comment? And then there's going to be dialogue around impact. And as Kristen said earlier, she teased out the difference between intent and impact. So keep that in mind as we're discussing some of the posts that were posted as a result of the first panel discussion. Really think about, how can we call that person in? And, you know, again, this conversation isn't about shaming. It really is drawing the person in to have a conversation versus pushing someone out. So again, really pay close attention to how the panelist has that dialogue, again, in calling, in inviting individuals into a discussion. And keep in mind the historical context that would offer greater understanding. Many times, just like I gave the example of colorblindness, I too, years ago, would say that. And now that I understand the historical context of really what does that mean, and the impact it has for others, it makes a difference and changes behavior. So again, please keep in consideration the historical context in which we're going to be speaking from this evening.
So I'm going to read the first comment. My daughter's closest friends have all different skin tones and shades. She never asks why. She just enjoys their company and plays with them. And that for me is a win. She enjoys everyone's company. I don't need to create an issue where there isn't one for her. It's the rest of the world that has a problem. For me, there are several parts that resonate with this comment. I do understand the need for parents to want to protect their children from the ugliness in the world. From the moment they are born, we want to protect them. My oldest son was born 5 weeks early and had to spend the first few weeks in the NICU. And I remember looking at him and thinking about how I just wanted to take him home and make sure he was safe. And that carries with you. You want to shield them from everything. But the problem is that isn't realistic. Things are out there. Whether it's the broken arm he suffered in the driveway, seemed sad when he didn't make the team he was trying out for, or having him stumble across footage of the George Floyd's death. We cannot protect them forever. So when the commenter says, why make a problem for my daughter when there is none for her? The issue that it is a problem for too many other kids. Author Blair Amani recently tweeted, if Black children are old enough to experience racism, then white children are old enough to talk about it and learn about it. That really struck a chord with me and should remind white parents that we need to have these conversations and we can't shy away because we're scared or afraid to say the wrong thing. Silence also sends the wrong message. Children are bombarded with images from the media, from movies, from books. They read, and that messages that white children too frequently get from that is that people that look different from them should be feared, that Black people are not equal, that being different is somehow bad. So it doesn't matter if I tell them that everyone's equal. If they see a world around them that treats Black people as unequal, in that comment, it is wonderful. It is wonderful that that child plays with all kids. That's awesome. That's why kids are awesome, right? Like they just love people. That's the beauty. And they don't care until they learn otherwise. So either they learn from us that people are different, and not only is that okay and that is beautiful, but also there are people out there who may treat people who look differently badly, and that is not okay. So I'm not teaching my kids about racism. I want them to be anti-racist, and that means they will work against it actively. Clearly, I can have deeper discussions with my 10-year-old, and he understands a lot about the history that Dr. Gillens was referring to because we've talked about it over the years. But even with my younger son, we talk and point out differences in people and discuss how it's beautiful. We need to expose our kids to the beauty of the world, but also prepare them to face and fight against the ugliness in the world, no matter how hard that may be and how much we want to protect them. We want all kids to have a better world, not just mine. So we must do this.
Thank you, Brian. I don't have much to add to that, Brian. My only add on or echoing is I do believe as parents, it truly is important for us to be our children's first teachers. And to your point, what I prefer for these early lessons to happen elsewhere, right? And pointing out differences in a way in which we are vilifying people versus me being the teacher, and to your point, pointing out the beauty and differences and the uniqueness that we all bring to this thing called humanity, right? And how we're treating each other and even standing up to when others are mistreated. And that's the action piece to really help our kids early on to notice it and to speak up and to address it. So thank you for that, Brian.
One thing I just want to jump in and add is, the part that jumps out at me is where she says, where there isn't an issue for her. And Brian touched on this. And I think that one of the key things that we can do for our children is to help foster empathy. So as a white mom who has white children, racism isn't an issue for my children, but I want them to understand how it is an issue for their friends and their neighbors and the people that they come in contact with. And so that if they see it or witness it, they can be sensitive to it. And instead of just looking and wondering and being confused and thinking, what was that? Why did they say that? Or they can understand and have context, because the reality is that our children are going to come up and witness incidences of racism most likely in their lives against their friends or peers if they're white, or against themselves if they are a child of color. And so I want my children to have empathy so they can be there, they can understand what they're witnessing and be prepared to do something about it. So I don't like to think of it as it not being a problem for my kid, because it should be a problem for all of our children. Because if any child is being treated unfairly or unjustly or in a racist manner, then that's a problem for all of us, and our children need to understand that too.
Thank you. I think I have the next comment. And it is, I have been on the reverse end of discrimination as a child living in a rural area where white people weren't accepted. I know how it feels not to have the acceptable color skin or being an outsider because you're not born and raised in a certain town. Racism isn't only toward Black people, there is more than one race. So this comment is interesting for a multitude of reasons. So I think I'll start with the last part first. And the commenter is absolutely correct. There is more than one race. The part that I think we need to unpack deals with this notion of not being accepted because of the color of your skin, and helping the person understand the differences between discrimination and racism. So what the person felt was just that, discrimination because they were an outsider, not so much because they were white. I think what's missing from this is the notion of the absence of power. So these young people, I'm assuming that they were children, didn't necessarily welcome this person into their community space because they were different. If we would have appreciated and talked about those differences, or if that mom or dad or parent or caregiver would have had the conversation about differences and how we explore creating community when people don't share the same skin tone or skin color, then I think he or she would have had less of an issue. So let's talk about this notion of, when I talk to young people, my children included, I talk about the melting pot versus the tossed salad or trail mix. I think the melting pot idea is dangerous because you're telling me that I need to melt down and assimilate and be more or one of the same. Whereas if we talked about this notion of a tossed salad, if I am a tomato or a cucumber or crouton or anything else, I am not being asked to melt to be and become something different. And the same thing goes for a trail mix. If we're going to talk about the beauty of differences and what each person brings to the larger, greater community, then we'll have a great conversation. Also, I think it's really important that we talk about identity so that children have a strong sense of self. How do they develop this strong sense of self if we're never going to talk about race? What it means to grow up as a Black person, or to grow up as a white person, or an Asian person, or any other person who identifies as such. And there is no such thing. I think we just need to name it and be very clear. There is no such thing as reverse racism. Like, that's not a thing. And it'll never be a thing because of positional power.
Thank you, Heidi. That was, so many important points in there. And I don't have a lot to add, except I'll just add on to your very last point there that, you made that point of discrimination. And so lots of people can experience discrimination, but the reason why there isn't such a thing as reverse racism is because racism isn't just an individual action of one person treating another person badly. The problem is systemic. It's institutional. It is laws that treat one race differently than another. It's policies that treat one group of people differently than another. It's one race having more power than another and then using that power to discriminate. And that's where racism isn't just bullying. It's not just discrimination. It's a whole system. And so that system is dependent on one group having more power than the other. And in our world, white people have more power than people of color. And so that is why there is no such thing as reverse racism, because there's that people of color, Black people, Indigenous people don't have the power to put down, to keep down white people. And so that's where that confusion comes in a lot. It's kind of hard to understand. It's a big issue to grasp. And so I think that the more we can help our children even understand that, even though it's a huge concept, to help them see that racism isn't just individual actions, but to help them see how our society has for so long done things that that have made it so that Black people don't have as much agency in the world. And we're going to mention our list of resources at the end, but there are a number of resources that list podcasts and books and all kinds of things that discuss these issues. So there's lots of good information out there to learn and understand more. So Isa, do you want to read our next one?
All right. Okay, so my daughter plays with a boy who has high functioning autism. Am I supposed to make sure that she knows he has autism and he's different than her? No, I let them play like any other children would. She has another friend that is 100% African American. Do I need to plan it out to her that her friend is African American and she's white? I don't think so. Again, I'm not going to make a problem for a small child where there isn't one. We all live in a melting pot around here. Well, there are a few things that struck me in this comment. The first is the issue of making a problem where there isn't one. Okay, so the approach, and I think the impression that we often get is that these discussions are problematic. And that, to me, speaks volumes about what we as adults understand this discussion to mean. I think we need to, I would encourage us all to do our part to view it differently. View it as a party, a celebration, something that we should lean into. Maybe not as directly as sitting down with your daughter and saying, well, your friend is African American or Black, you are white. That's not what I would do. And I totally applaud the fact that you allow your children and encourage your children to play with a diverse set of kids and people. But I would also encourage that you take an active stance in celebrating and encouraging those discussions about race and actually talking about some of the issues around race and the impact that it could potentially have. Now, as far as celebrating race, for me, when we sit around and have ethnic food, we talk about the people that usually would eat that type of food. Or if we're having pizza, we talk about Italy and how this is a product of Italy. Like in that manner, that's how I typically approach discussions about race. I don't sit down and say, well, this pizza came from white people. We are Black people. That's not what I do. And that's not what we do as a family. I also encourage my kids to play with diverse, kids of all backgrounds. But on top of that, I do make sure that when it comes to race and when it comes to different people, I encourage them to view them as being worthy, being worthy of love, to put it better, and worthy of appreciation, no matter what their skin tone is. So I approach it from that angle. It's a good thing that they are different than me because we get to learn something new from them. And it's a good thing that I am different from them because they get to learn something from me as well. So I approach the differences not so much as it being a problem, but as it being a cause for celebration. And, to harp on the melting pot comment, a portion of the comment, again, we could take it back to the notion that we live in a community, a diverse community, and that's more akin to a salad. So you have your croutons, you have your lettuce, and you might throw in some ranch dressing, but it's all beautiful and tasty when it comes together. So that's all I have to add in regards to this particular comment.
So I'll share a bit. It's just taking a feather out of your cap. When we think about the salad or trail mix or any other blend of food, I think if there is something new in our mix-up, we have to talk about it, right? So I remember giving my young people, my own children, edamame. They had no idea what it was. I had to explain what edamame was. Now I'm going to rewind 20 years ago. I was teaching second grade, and one of my students, I had 34 second graders in my class, 34 7-year-olds. I'll just let you think about that for a moment. 34 7-year-olds. And one of my students was autistic. And autism, the Asperger syndrome, 20 years, Asperger spectrum rather, 20 years ago was fairly new in education. We didn't know a lot about it. 20 years ago, I was about 23 years old. So I was fairly new in education. I've been teaching about 3 or 4 years. And my student, one student autistic, my other students had trouble understanding my student, let's call him Kevin's different abilities. So I had to have a conversation. I couldn't ignore that Kevin brought something totally different to our classroom. I had to talk about it. I had to talk about his ingenuity. I didn't talk about things that Kevin wasn't good at or Kevin had trouble doing. I talked about what he brought to the conversation, what he brought to the classroom. We celebrated his differences in a very unique way, but that also made my students comfortable, so they asked questions, and it also made him comfortable, and it made his parents comfortable. So ignoring it, I think, would have been dangerous and extremely problematic for everybody involved. So yeah, I think you do talk to your children about autism. You talk to them about some of the differences that their friends have. We can't shy away from having these conversations, because if we don't, then we run the risk of them receiving and hearing misinformation from others. And that's what we want to mitigate and prevent, just the spewing of misinformation. That's all I have to say about that.
I suspect that Kevin felt very seen in your classroom, Heidi. And I think that is what is so important to remember in all of this, is that we don't want children to feel invisible because of their differences. We want them to feel seen, and that those differences are something that enrich our world or enrich our classroom. And what a lucky kid to have such an awesome teacher. So why don't we move on to the next quote? Maisha?
Okay, all children have self-esteem that needs to be built up no matter what color of your skin. I was picked on for having Reeboks shoes, wearing glasses, being too skinny, overweight, and in quotes, trailer trash. I know white girls who are cutting themselves, coloring their hair, same with boys, with having the latest sneakers, book bags, clothes, etc. So how I'm reading this statement is that all children, all walks of life have, whether it be self-esteem issues or concerns, or peer pressure from either what they're saying with their peers or what they're seeing on the media. And my personal take is that at no time has the panel ever discounted or disregarded what other people's experiences are, for sure. That we do know our young people have so many, and I call them adult issues, which always breaks my heart. So when we do put race on the table, where I would love for people to be able to understand that that is something you take with you, you live with, you're born with, you walk around with. That's something that can't be hidden. And unfortunately, there are many people in this society who do look at the color of someone's skin and treat them accordingly. Unfortunately, we have data that supports. So, for instance, even when we look at COVID-19, and we know from our data that the Black community has died at a higher rate. It isn't because the Black community is doing something different. It's a historical issue among how racism really impacts an entire community, or poor health care over generations and generations. So when COVID hits, this is a community, for example, that's hit much higher. So to discount race, it's definitely not acknowledging as to how this country was built on. But again, never just to discount if a young person wants to call self-harm. That is of concern, no matter what the color of the child is. So being teased, bullying, etc. We do not. That's not okay. That's not acceptable. What I'm doing is how I'm taking away from this is I'm separating it out to say, yes, on one end, for sure, any child who is having issues, self-esteem issues, and I'm a school representative from a school level perspective, of course, seeking out help, seeking out counseling. And so again, just carving out, there's a different place in conversation when it comes to race.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure if this was this comment was written in response to a comment that I made regarding my children and how I position them in front of the mirror. And again, I encourage them to embrace themselves in entirety. Don't change a thing about yourself. And you're right. You know, you have other kids that might have issues due to being overweight, skinny, wearing glasses, being different for whatever reason. This is kind of different. And I say that not in any disrespectful way whatsoever. It is something that race, when it comes to race and people of color, it is something like Maisha had mentioned that you can't change. It is something that people have been forced to endure in this country since its inception. You know, we brought a brunt of a catalog of dire consequences simply based on that, something that we can't change. So yes, it would behoove me to make sure that my kids are as prepared as possible for what might come and what is likely to come, given the history of race relations and the way that we approach race in this country. I think that that particular meal that my kids are likely to endure is just something that is sad, it's tragic, but it's real. And as a parent, there's no way that I would dream of not putting my kids in a position to appreciate themselves for who they are. Because again, that is not the message. Much like being overweight, let's be clear, in this country, folks that are overweight are viewed differently than folks that are not. There's a premium placed on people who are not overweight. And the same thing can be said, and then some, as it pertains to race. So I do what I can to make sure that my children, it's not so much about self-esteem, understand that they are African-American and everything beautiful that comes with that. Again, that is not to say that they are above or greater than just because of, but that they should embrace that and appreciate that. That's all I have to add on that.
Thank you. As a white parent, I'm going to speak to the white parents out there, and I'm going to echo some of what Maisha said. Is we do recognize that all children struggle, right? Just because you're white doesn't mean things are easy, and we're not going to diminish anybody's struggles. But we also have to acknowledge that the color of our skin is not one of the difficulties that white people face on a broad scale, right? I've been in situations where I was mocked because I was white, but that never stopped me from getting a job, didn't deny me a loan, didn't make me face any of the obstacles that Black Americans have faced for generations. And this isn't about our guilt. I mean, this is about acknowledging the wrongs of the past and making sure our kids help create a world that will truly be better for all kids. You know, so that means I do teach my kids about race, about actively finding stories that show the counter narrative. That means answering my kids' questions honestly. That means ensuring that they not only understand the historical struggle for equality, but I also want to make sure that not every story that I read to them or every movie we watch doesn't depict Black people's victims or civil rights heroes, but shows them as scientists and inventors and depicts them in a positive light. You know, I understand this is a touchy subject for white people, but we have to confront it if we want to change things. You know, we have to acknowledge that it is different, and if we want to make things right. So I don't want any child to suffer, you know, for any reason, you know, but I especially don't want any children to suffer because of the color of skin. And this isn't about pieces of a pie where things are limited. It's about making things right for everyone and taking action to change things to make it better.
Thank you all so much. We now have about 10 minutes for questions. So we are going to have our Anne Arundel County Public Library moderators jump in, and they will ask us the questions that have been being posted.
Great, wonderful. Yeah, so the first question is, I am an educator in a predominantly white district. What should we do when parents remark that anti-racism is just in the liberal political agenda?
So I tried to touch on that a little bit at the beginning by sharing that quote from Dr. Kane, the superintendent in Queen Anne's County Public Schools, who said that you know, race and injustice is not a political issue. It is a human issue. It is an issue about caring for people, about showing empathy for our fellow Americans, for our fellow citizens, for our neighbors, our friends, our classmates. And so understanding what racism is and how to be anti-racist has nothing to do with whether you're liberal or conservative or Democrat or Republican. It has to do with being a good person. If anyone else has anything to add, or if we want to jump to another question.
All right, hearing nothing to add, maybe we'll jump to our second question here. I hear the panelists talk about celebrating difference and would love it if could model a few ways to enter a discussion about valuing difference and talk about how their friends of color may have different experiences.
Well, I would say you have to be strategic with what you choose to like read to your kids, and you look at authors and you choose authors of color, and it's one simple way. And as you're reading a book, especially with my younger child, I point out if people look different, and we talk about the beauty and we talk about what the differences are in the characters of the book. And just to show in a time where things aren't, you know, you're in that grocery store and they ask you that question about somebody, and it shouldn't be a moment where you want to get all hushed up. So has been times when they say stuff and we don't go, oh, we don't talk about that. We, like I said before, we answer those questions then and there and openly and say, yes, that person does look different, or these are things that are different and beautiful about that. So when things become later, when questions, as my kid has gotten older, it makes some of the more difficult conversations easier to have if you've laid the groundwork and had these conversations about the differences in the world and differences in people and where people are from and different backgrounds and all those kind of things in a way.
And so,
With that.
okay.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Well, I was going to add, just from a structure from the school system perspective, I was going to talk about community building circles. And so many of our schools in Anne Arundel County will start their morning off with, you can call them morning meetings, community building circles, and really getting to know children, right? For each child to really get to know each other's story. And we're really big on talking about each other's stories. And this notion of, if I know you, right? If I truly get to know you, and then maybe I will be less likely to be mean to you, to mistreat you, to bully you. Many times it's either ignorance, I just don't know, right? It could be stories, narratives that I'm being told that I believe to be true. But once I truly get to know you on a personal level, whether it is, oh, I didn't realize we had that in common. Oh, how fascinating. I've never experienced that before. That's very different. Tell me more. So I can say that the district is very intentional. And like I said, many of our schools do. And so ask your students, ask them about community building circles. But that is a way, as an example, for students to be able to really see themselves as these unique, beautiful humans.
In relation to, you know, just the idea of differences and how to celebrate it, I think one thing that for us as adults, we tend to have been raised in a way where noticing differences was kind of shunned or discouraged. You know, if a child is in the grocery store and they see somebody who's different, let's say a child says, oh, look at that black man over there. You know, I think that many times an adult's response is to say, shh, no, don't say anything. And instead, if you have a young child who says something like that, don't make them feel ashamed, because they pick up on those things and then they think that it's the difference that's the problem. And so instead, what you can say is, yes, isn't his skin beautiful? Or, yes, let's ask him his name. You know, start a conversation. Don't shush the child. Don't make them feel discouraged from noticing those differences, because it's normal for children to notice differences. And children often just notice things and they're not assigning a good or a bad value to that difference. They're simply just noticing it. And so then you can help them assign that positive attribute to it. So when they notice that difference, then you follow it up with something positive. Say, yes, his skin is beautiful. Or, oh, let's have a conversation. You know, I'm a social worker and I used to work in hospitals with children who had many very complex health issues. And some of the children that I worked with had tracheostomies, and they would get stared at a lot, you know, and kids would be at the playground and they would see their trach and the kids would be curious about it. And parents would tend to turn their child away and shush them and say, don't ask about that, don't point that out. But the children themselves who had tracheostomies and their parents told me that they would have much, much rather that that the parents say, well, yeah, that is something that helps her breathe. Let's get to know her. Let's talk to her. Let's have a conversation. Because in shushing your child and turning them away, it makes that child with the tracheostomy feel invisible and feel that they don't matter. So just like Heidi, talked about Kevin's differences and what he brought to the classroom, we should encourage our children to notice differences and to celebrate how each of those things makes the world better, more interesting, more beautiful, and to bring humanity to people who may have something that's different than your child has.
Well, if I may, a few weeks ago, I actually went into a restaurant, and I ordered a pizza, and the gentleman at the counter happened to be from a country in Central America, but he had the same name as me, but his name wasn't pronounced like mine, it was Isau. And so we struck up a conversation, and boom, commonality, right? So we had the same name pronounced differently from different cultures, and I got an opportunity to share where my name came from, and he got an opportunity to share his, and it was great. So now when I go to a restaurant, I have a friend, my children see this, and they get to see me exchange pleasantries with a person who does not look like me, does not look like them, speaks with an accent, same name, commonality, embraced. That one moment was a teachable moment that we embraced. So that's just one example of many that I can offer right off the bat that could change things for a lot of people.
Are there more questions out there, Katie and Carlotta?
Yes, we have, I think, 4 more questions. The next one is, I have a 12-year-old who a friend tells her that their friendship has to be a secret because her parents are racists. How should I address this?
Can you read that again? I want to make sure I have the logistics of the situation correct.
I have a 12-year-old whose friend tells her that their friendship has to be a secret because her parents are racists. How should I address this?
Well, for me, I think that the first thing that comes to mind is safety. You want to make sure that you are keeping your children's safety at all costs. And you also want to believe the stories that children tell you. I would, depending on how close the children are, and by closeness I mean physical proximity, but also the history of the relationship, and if they're in the same community, I have lots more questions than I have solutions. But I think just given what we see in this particular question, I'm cautioned, and I am very curious about safety, whether or not the relationship can be sustained in a safe way first.
I'm assuming the question is coming from a person of color, so that the child who is being told it has to be kept a secret is Black. And as a white mom, I feel partly not able to answer this question, but the one thing I would talk with that child about is how that makes her feel, or him. I guess we didn't know. That has to feel really awful, to feel that you have to keep something a secret because the friend's parents might think horrible things about you simply because of the color of your skin. And so, related to Heidi's concern about safety, I would be really concerned about that child's mental health, and if this particular friendship is good for that child's mental health, because it can't feel good to feel that you, as an individual, basically have to be kept a secret. That would be my concern. Go ahead with the next question.
Alrighty. Do teachers have the responsibility to teach the gaps in history, in the history of this country, to help correct those misconceptions which have historically and systemically ingrained in learners?
I would say so. Speaking as a former history teacher myself, I strive to do that. I strive to inject truth, or what I understand to be truth, as much as possible. So yes, the onus is upon them to speak truth, and in doing so, embolden the students to bring that truth forward and to move from a position of it. I think that would answer a lot of questions about that we have with regards to race, and make it more difficult for those notions to become embedded and fester in the minds of our young people. So teachers are in a prime position to address this issue at an early age. I think some either are unable to or neglect to, but they should be interested in bringing truth to bear.
Thank you. I'm going to close out. We only have time for this last question. And from a school district's perspective, I wanted to make sure that for those who have not seen any of the superintendent's columns, he wrote, I would say maybe about a month ago, about the school district's efforts to definitely, I would call, scrub, right, our curriculum. We have had many town hall meetings with young people, and in particular, children of color, who really express concerns about our curriculum being whitewashed. This is the language in which our young people have used. And in response, to your point, Issa, it is our responsibility to make sure that our curriculum is telling the whole story, telling a story that is that's celebrating each of us, especially people of color, not telling a single story about what, in particular, people of color have done or contributed to our nation. So we are, as a school district, working very closely alongside our partners in curriculum and instruction to ensure that what we are teaching our students are, and for this particular statement, it said gaps in history. So I'm just going to repeat back how the question was posed. So yes, I do encourage each of you watching to definitely pay close attention, especially when the superintendent puts out his statements about what the district is doing, especially as it relates to this conversation. So thank you for the questions. I think we have just time to close out. So here are some concluding thoughts as we wrap up this dialogue. We are always, always learning. I do not want anyone to think that, oh, listen to this hour, I got this. No, no, no. We're always learning. It's always a journey. There's always something new to learn. Does it get messy sometimes? Yes, it does. It certainly does. But I always say, you can't say you tried something, right? You got to try it. You have to, if we want to make this a better place for our children, we have to put ourselves out there. We have to take risks. We have to be willing to put the work in to have really great outcomes for our kids. We must teach children to notice and celebrate differences. Again, our messaging matters. They are watching us. We are modeling for them how we respond to others and interact with one another. And take time to understand the impact of your words and actions. And again, in the district, we talk a lot about intent versus impact. I didn't intend to hurt the person's feeling. Well, you did. That decision had a negative impact on someone else. So the big message, again, is really taking that time to truly step back and understand, how did my actions, how did my words impact someone else? So these are our concluding thoughts. And Kristen, oh, I think I do the resources as well. So for resources, If you go to the links below on this slide, if you see that, aacps.org, Let's Talk Justice, and kindnessgrowshere.com, there are a lot of resources to help you along this journey, from children's books regarding race and racism, books for parents on social justice and anti-racism, articles, videos, websites, podcasts, etc. To really, what we say in the district is we must do our own work. It starts with us. And so we are providing you with those resources so you can begin doing your own work.
So I wanted to just let everybody know that on Thursday, Kindness Grows Here is partnering again with the library for this Let's Celebrate Differences event, where we're going to have 3 teens who chose one of their favorite children's books. They're going to read the book, and we're going to have a little bit of fun, singing and dancing in between the books, and discussion of talking about the importance of having diverse characters in books and the themes of these books. So we hope that you will join us for that, as it's a great continuation of this discussion. And I just want to thank everyone who joined us tonight. It's been a privilege to help plan and participate in this discussion. As we leave, I hope everyone here will remember that simply starting these conversations with your children is such an important first step. You are expanding their experiences and making them more empathetic and caring. In the powerful book, The Hate You Give, the main character Star says at one point, "What's the point of having a voice if you're going to be silent in those moments you shouldn't be?" So don't be silent now with your children. By having these conversations, you are teaching that when they see injustice in the world, that they shouldn't be silent either. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.